Wait.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Technical. Okay.
It's all good.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, folks, the most wonderful time of the week. The founder of Daily Kos, the founder of Civics with a Q, the host of the new and most popular podcast, The Brief.
Every week.
The largest online progressive community, the largest polling sample of most polls, the largest audience, YouTube and podcast.
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
It's getting there. It's getting
You're batting well. If this was baseball, you'd be in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. I help him with his PR, folks. We just Marcos Melitsas joins us as always from the left coast. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Doing good. I like your fancy background.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Do you have a green screen back there?
Got a green screen back here.
Oh, I like it.
But we're working on some other stuff coming, some other big things coming.
Ooh, cool.
One day soon, you all may actually see a big picture window overlooking Times Square behind me.
Oh,
so
nice.
Tease that out a little bit, y'all. In real life, so just
in real life.
Yeah, just hold on.
Oh,
yeah, we're
okay.
I don't know if you ever watched the Jeffersons growing up, but the song "Moving On Up to a Deluxe Apartment."
Yeah,
and so we might be moving on up here on Make It Plain. So y'all stay tuned. But do not misinterpret the appearance to suggest wealth at all. So please send money if you want.
We're all hustling.
It's what this is all about. We're trying to get it done. So we didn't get a chance to talk last week. But today's Thursday. Wednesday, of course, these reparations bill markup, DC statehood markup. More on that later. But so many positive, progressive things happening. Infrastructure I guess I would say FDR, but it was really the highway system got built under Eisenhower. But infrastructure, big, tucked in there. $5.3 billion, Marcos, for gun violence prevention to go to organizations doing work on the ground. Never happened before. That's on last Wednesday, a week ago. Friday, a week ago tomorrow, I'm looking up and just get a notification. He's actually going to appoint a commission to expand the Supreme Court. What? So Joe Biden is doing, and I've been looking at other people on television who've been saying out loud, we really weren't expecting.
Nobody was.
Historically moderate, plain white bread, unexciting candidate that shouldn't be the nominee. Those are your words. To do.
Oh, yeah.
But when I saw infrastructure, $5.3 billion for gun violence prevention, commission to expand the Supreme Court, one thing after the other, I'm like, I think it's a legacy thing too, though, Marcos. You reach an age in life where you realize you have an opportunity. I want to be, if you're the president, you want to be the best president ever. That's how you want to go down, right? So you do these things.
Yeah, no, there is absolutely zero people who thought this was going to happen. I mean, nobody thought. And we thought we'd be gearing up to do battle, to push him to just do normal things, and, the way we had to with Barack Obama. And of course, Obama had to deal with being a black candidate and being a lightning rod. And I think one of the big factors here is that the right wing has no freaking clue how to deal with Joe Biden. They just they can't get that anger, that visceral anger for him. And so you have, here you have Biden passing a nearly $2 trillion rescue plan. Now he's talking $3 trillion in infrastructure. And Fox News is talking about Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss. Like, they can't even bring themselves. Can you imagine if this was President Warren or President Bernie or President AOC, right? Exact same actions. You would be talking about the end of civilization. But because he's an old white guy, they just really don't know how to deal with that. And so Biden, who's history of being the senator from MBNA, right? I mean, he carried water for the credit card industry. He eviscerated Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court hearings. He was the author of the crime bill, right? The infamous crime bill. This guy's history is not a great history, and we really zeroed in on that during the primary. And then black voters said in South Carolina said, yeah, all that, but Donald Trump, and this is still America. And we know what America looks like, probably better than anybody else, right? And, people like me were kind of like, respectful, but skeptical.
Yeah.
And so we thought, okay, getting rid of Donald Trump is the greater necessity, right? If that's what we're going for, here for, I'll respect that. Let's get rid of Donald Trump. Turns out it was a lot harder than we even thought.
Mm-hmm.
And there is real question right now whether anybody else in that field could have beaten Donald Trump. And he may literally have been the only candidate in that race, because everybody else was either gay or female or black or Latino or multiples of those, combinations. And so there's a real question. Like, if the old boring white guy barely won, what would it have been like had we had somebody that was more polarizing to the right wing? So that we could debate that. We can't peek into an alternate universe and see what happened. But what we can say is that there is zero indication that Biden would govern this way. And just even look at the way he campaigned, right? He told wealthy donors that, nobody would have to pay extra, that he told the people, all we're going to do is go back to the Obama years. He argued time and time again that he could get Republicans to come aboard and that he would work hard to get Republican support for his priorities. He hasn't done any of that stuff. I mean, he's pushing for a tax cut for the wealthy and corporations. I mean, tax increases. He was happy to pass the rescue plan with 0 Republican votes, and he's going to be just as happy to pass an infrastructure bill with 0 Republican votes. Like that, and there's nothing about going back to the Obama years, right? He's pushing ahead, like he's pushing hard, and even Bernie Sanders said that the $1.9 trillion rescue plan, which is smaller than his infrastructure bill. I mean, Bernie Sanders said that was the most consequential piece of legislation out of Washington D.C. since the '60s. But it's not even like me and you like being apologists for Joe Biden, right? Because there's really, it's Bernie Sanders. Saying like nobody's done anything like this in 60 years.
Right.
That's crazy stuff. And so now if we can keep this momentum going, if this infrastructure bill passes, if we can make the child tax credit, that monthly tax credit that all parents get, if we can make that permanent, which is still not permanent, it expires at the end of the year. Right there alone, that's already a transformational presidency. Now, if you can figure out how to get immigration reform in there, DC statehood, expand the Supreme Court, these are all things that are possible. I don't think they're probable at this point, but they're certainly possible. And it's going to set up a situation where it's the ball game is going to be next November. I mean, I don't even want. I love elections. I don't want to talk about elections right now. It's going to be hard next November, but we need to get Joe Manchin out of that driver's seat. It has to happen. Mm-hmm. And we have great Senate pickup opportunities. We can actually pick up 5-6 seats, theoretically. We can also lose 5-6 seats. And every single Senate battleground is in a state that was a presidential battleground. And we saw how those went, right? It's going to be Wisconsin, and it's going to be Pennsylvania and Florida and Georgia and Arizona and North Carolina. It's the same freaking states. And I don't think much is going to change, right? I mean, I think we're so locked in those. Those are battleground states for a reason, right? These are all 50-50 states. Mm-hmm. You have to deal with presidential party burnout that we've historically seen in every first midterm election of a new president, except for George Bush after 9/11. And so we have to basically overcome historical trends to be able to expand that majority. We don't need 5-6 seats. We need 2. We just need to get freaking Sinema and Manchin out of the driver's seat. and then a lot changes. But the House, we have redistricting ahead, right? And Republicans are on the driver's seat in gerrymandering. There's a lot here at stake, but it's amazing what I'm already taking credit, what Joe Biden has accomplished so far.
Well, and what he's done is hopefully build the case and make it easier for Democrats as, next November comes around. What is Civic saying about Joe Biden's approval numbers right now?
So Joe Biden, we have him lower than a lot of the public polling. Yeah. Some of the public polling is like 60-40. It's just not. It's just not that good. We have him, slightly overboard. We have him in the low 50s, which is much better than Donald Trump ever got. I think Donald Trump's highest was 43% in our polling. So we have Joe Biden low 50s. He's obviously has universal support amongst Democrats. Republicans all hate him. I mean, what you expect. And he's slightly above water with independents, which independents hate everybody. I mean, that's just the factor. They didn't like Trump. They don't like Joe Biden, generally speaking. But he's got a slight lead. And I think that's about right, just given how polarized we are as a country. There's a thing, we've talked about this before. It's a thing called, in polling, called response bias. So when your party's doing well, you're more likely to answer a poll than when things are going crappy. You don't want to talk politics, right? And Civic's polling, our methodology eliminates response bias. And most traditional polling, especially anything done over the phone, does not. So who's going to answer the phone right now? Is it going to be a Democrat who's excited about everything that's going on? Or is it going to be a conservative who really just wants to talk about Mr. Potato Head because everything else, they can't even get their shit together to oppose multi-trillion-dollar bills. This is like low-hanging. This is like hitting watermelons, right, for Republicans, and they can't pull it together.
Yeah. So speaking of statehood and speaking of mansions, I have some calculus. Just let's walk through this for a minute. We don't know what Joe Manchin's doing. Don't really understand. I mean, he's just being Joe Manchin. It would behoove Joe Manchin to vote for DC statehood, because it would then literally free him, Marcos, to do whatever he wants to do and not be the person to sabotage everything. In fact, he could even flip Republican if he wanted to. Who would care? But if we get statehood and get those two senators, he can just be his usual crazy self. I just think it will be glaring. And folk are already talking about going to see him. I'm getting calls like, we need to send buses. We need to go see him in West Virginia or something, whether that'll help or not. But I mean, people are getting very impatient with him. He just can't get away with blocking everything. So I hope someone says to him, hey, dude, just vote for statehood. And then you don't have to vote for nothing else. Just go ahead, do that, and leave the Democrats be. But for him to position himself, I think he's ahistorical too, because there were times in history from Southern senators like Eastland and Thurman and people like that who blocked everything. Is that the way Joe Manchin really wants to be remembered? I would think not. I mean, I don't know, but I just think if he votes for statehood, he can then free himself up to do whatever he wants to do.
So which is why I'm surprised he's not also. I mean, that's probably maybe a reason he's against eliminating the filibuster right now, because as long as there's a filibuster, he doesn't have to be the 60th vote. My thinking has always been, you eliminate the filibuster, you're actually more important. You actually matter more. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's just easier for him to be the thorn on the side. Now, Manchin is a very sort of interesting case because we have no business having a senator in West Virginia right now. West Virginia is, I forget, right? It's like the second or third most Republican state in the country. I mean, it's like if we had a Democratic senator in Wyoming or North Dakota. I mean, that's how crazy it is. So the fact that we have any senator, and keep in mind that seat has given us the majority, right? Because we have a 50-50 Senate. So he does get some latitude. Sometimes you wonder why he cares about some things and not other things. He's a very weird person. You know, his thing on minimum wage, right? I'm not sure given but his sort of tact has always been to be a conservative Democrat, and you know maybe that'll get him elected. And almost every Democrat that got elected in West Virginia, including the current governor, was a Republican, and they all flipped, right? So he's the last guy standing, and he could flip at any time, and he hasn't, right? So there's something keeping him a Democrat because he doesn't have to be, and he ran for re-election. And it was a midterm election, and he barely won. He won by 3 points. It was the closest election. I don't see how he wins in a presidential year. Like, and I don't know how he thinks he wins in a presidential year. And he's taken some steps that have been surprisingly progressive, and he's criticized Trump in a very again, surprising way because he's sort of started to deviate. And for a while I thought, well, maybe he's given up. Like he's not running for re-election anymore. And he's just gonna do the right thing because it's the right thing. And you almost saw this in that in the 1.9 trillion rescue plan, right? Because he did block the minimum wage increase, but he started making some noise, and then just Biden gave him some gift. Here's some money for rural broadband, and we're going to pull back on some other thing. It was like almost a relatively minimal gesture, but he got to declare victory. Like, you know, he had his impact, and Biden got the $1.9 trillion. So now we get to do this all over again with this $3 trillion infrastructure bill. But there's no doubt that Joe Manchin wants to brag about bringing, you know, and I actually believe he cares about the people in his state, right? So here's a chance for him to do the right thing. DC statehood's weird, right? Because it doesn't affect West Virginia directly. It's going to be an easy line of attack for his opponents in his re-election campaign, right? They'll accuse him of in dog whistle, or maybe not even in dog whistle, how he basically put more black people in the Senate, right? I mean, he's going to get it. It's going to be racist and ugly, and because that's what West Virginia is in Appalachia. So he's got to know that's coming. But even then, he hasn't shut the door on statehood, which he's happy to shut the door on things. I mean, he's not shy to say, I'm not going to let this go. And he actually left the door open on DC and Puerto Rico as well. And Mark, we've talked about Puerto Rico before, and that's it's a much more complicated story there. So as much as I want DC, Puerto Rican statehood, it's not as simple as DC. DC's open shut. There's just no freaking argument against it. Puerto Rico, there are arguments against it. And so that needs a whole different calculation. But at least with DC, he's left the door open. Does that mean he's going to vote for it? Obviously, no. But I think there's a chance for it. And I would obviously love to see it before next year's elections. And I mean, Mark, you're right in the middle right now of that, you know, of that debate. So let me ask you: are Sinema and Manchin and maybe Angus King, are those the holdouts right now on the Senate side as far as Democrats are concerned?
Well, no, because my understanding is at the moment, and I don't know why I'm only going by the co-sponsor number, and it looks like there's still only 44 co-sponsors if that information is accurate. So we really don't know until we see what the full co-sponsor list is, because you want to get all 51 co-sponsors. So I'm not sure. At least those three are probably the ones still holding out. I'm not sure where the other people are right now. Jon Ossoff came on just a few weeks ago. That's big. I'm not sure what the rest of the sponsor list is. And so, you know, we'll just have to see. And I don't know, you know, and it's funny because, you know, usually people who are really for a bill, they come on and co-sponsor. But then the others, because of politics, don't co-sponsor, but when it comes to the floor, they go ahead and vote for it. So I'm sure there are a handful of Democrats that are still kind of in that category. They just want to vote, not be on the bill. But at least we do know that the three you named, King, Manchin, and Sinema, have not signed on as co-sponsors as of yet.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I actually saw some things King was saying that didn't look. I mean, I don't think anybody has shut off. I haven't seen a single Democrat say absolutely no. And so at that point, there's hope, and there's who knows, maybe they're all polling in their state to see if anybody really cares. Because I just don't think anybody's it's not gonna register to somebody in Arizona or even West Virginia. And Republicans are gonna make a big deal out of Democrats rigging the system, and then you're gonna have that racist undertones, right? Because it's gonna be 2 new black senators. So you're gonna have
Marcos, hold it. Let me just pause you right there. The shadow delegation now, folks, so you don't know, statehood it follows the Tennessee plan of the 1700s, where you elect shadow senators and shadow members of Congress. The shadow delegation for DC now, because DC has become so gentrified, is white. Now, granted, those positions probably aren't as attractive to prominent black polls, although Jesse Jackson was one of the first shadow senators from DC. So I would not presume, because DC's become so gentrified, that they will be, so they no longer have the Marion Barry argument. So that was an argument for years. Marion Barry. And that's gone. That's gone. And so I don't know for sure that it will be African Americans. I think it would be appropriate. There's still the majority population.
I would hope so.
but I don't know. I mean, like, you know, Detroit has a white mayor now. I think Memphis does. They say the next mayor of Atlanta is going to be white. All these chocolate cities are gentrifying. So I don't even think they can do much with race around this. All they can say is it's going to be partisan. It's going to be Democrat.
Yeah.
But we don't know if it's going to be an African American.
Right. They're going to say that anyway.
Yeah,
the Marion Barry arguments. I mean, what else do they have?
Yeah,
they don't have anything.
Marion Barry.
They don't have anything else. So it's, I mean, I have high hopes. And this is one of those things that if we can win the election, you know, if it doesn't happen this year, it's definitely not going to happen next year. So it's got to happen this year. If it doesn't happen this year, then we have to win. You know, it just, again, our, you know, future of a democracy is yet again on the ballot. And
absolutely,
midterm elections are tough for the party in power. And so it's going to be, but I got to say, Mark, that I haven't seen the left this jazzed with a Democratic president probably ever.
No.
Probably ever. And if you got Bernie praising Joe Biden, and we know what a grump Bernie is, right? I mean, he's not going to praise any Democrat, you know, out of expedience. Like if he does it, you know, it's legit.
But Burners, he said grump. I didn't say that. So when y'all start trolling,
no, he's grumpy. Come on. I mean, it's not a bad thing. He's an ornery, grumpy guy, and I'm saying it. Don't yell at Mark. But
I'm just doing the hand gesture.
So for him to pray, if we can keep this momentum going and we can keep sort of delivering for people, and I've said this before, Mark, but if we can make the child tax credit the monthly check that people are going to get for their children, you know, $360 a month under the age of 6, $300 a month over the age of 6. If we can make that permanent, and you have these voters going to the polls, and the choices between continuing to receive that check and not having that check anymore, I got a QAnon people are going to have a hard time making that decision.
Yeah.
Because this is what Republicans are going to stand for. They're going to stand for taking away everything that we Democrats are giving to people now, because Republicans have no problem giving goodies to billionaires. I mean, that's all they do. And Joe Biden has messaged this so well that, again, it just blows my mind. Getting back to what is this Joe Biden, where, you know, because he's, you know, his whole argument is, oh, now they're going to talk about the deficit. They had no problem with the deficit when it was billionaires getting good stuff, but now we give regular people good stuff, and now they're crying about the deficit.
Right.
And you make that argument that is a very cogent, powerful, and true. Like, you don't even have to, like, nobody's got to be faking that one. It's not like Republicans making up Mr. Potato Head scandals out of nothing, right? I mean, it's a legitimately true argument. And you run on that. and you have the left energized. And then we have the big question mark: will the hidden deplorables, the Trump-only voters, will they turn out in the midterm election? They didn't last midterm. They didn't turn out for the Georgia runoff. If they don't turn out and our people do,
right,
game over.
And
at that point,
and it's
goodbye filibuster, goodbye, hello DC statehood, maybe hello Puerto Rican statehood. Good things can then finally truly happen. Also assuming that after redistricting, we can hold the House, which is another question mark because we don't know what those maps are going to look like.
Yeah, we know they're going to mess with the maps. No, you're right. And why would, I mean, we had to be prepared for them to come out, but then why would they? What's the incentive?
They're not riled up, right? Biden is not motivated.
Right. And now, they don't have any of their own stars on the ballot at the top of the ticket. It's a midterm. So,
yeah,
and then I'm gonna tell you, man, there's gonna be further demoralization. This Matt Gaetz thing, I mean, that's just ridiculous. And then the QAnon dude has also been running child porn sites. I did a show the other day on that. HBO didn't want to expose it. But see, I mean, projection is a hell of a thing, man.
That's all they do.
Is projection. Yeah. And maybe Hillary Clinton running child kidnapping porn out of piece of joint. They're doing that.
Yep. And weirdly, they're not talking about that. That's so strange. It's like almost as if they weren't really sincere about it this entire time, which would be absolutely shocking. But it's going to be I mean, I gotta say, we can talk about that next election and what we could accomplish with a bigger majority in the Senate and a more equitable Senate at that.
Yeah.
That said, what's being done right now is absolutely mind-boggling. Like, it just blows my mind that this is happening. And so I think we need to take a moment, really, as progressives, and sort of applaud ourselves and realize that all that hard work we did the last few cycles in getting Democrats elected and in clawing that Senate majority, despite this huge Republican advantage in that chamber, and maintaining a House majority despite districts that were drawn by Republicans in 2010, and winning the White House despite a map that once again advantages Republicans because of the Electoral College. Despite all those things, we have the trifecta, and it actually matters. Like, good stuff is happening, and that's because of all the hard work we did, knocking on doors and getting people registered to vote, and in donating money to campaigns, and Stacey Abrams doesn't flip Georgia blue without huge investment with small dollar donors and volunteers in Georgia and elsewhere. So these things are happening, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in places like Texas and Mississippi and South Carolina and North Carolina, maybe Florida always breaks our hearts. But these are all states where we have really good people working hard to organize. And we didn't get to where we are today because somebody decided to focus on Georgia 2 weeks before the election, right? That was a 10-year project. And Mark, we were talking about Georgia way back. And so I just want people to realize that we have to continue looking long-term. Like, I've been talking a lot about Mississippi, but Texas can flip sooner. And that would be a death knell to Republican chances to win the White House. Heck, just having the campaign in Texas is going to take money and time away from them spending time and money in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan. So it is our work actually matters, and this is why Biden is so transformational, because he can just basically go status quo and nominate some good people in some cabinet agencies and do some prevent harm from being done, which has been a lot what previous Democratic presidents have done, right? They've prevented harm from being done. Not a bad thing. It doesn't really motivate people to turn out and vote. What Biden is doing, I think, is truly going to motivate people to turn out and vote. And it's imperative for Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Except I just don't see Sinema standing by herself if Joe Manchin is voting for something, right? So it's really coming down to Joe Manchin. Does he want to kneecap Joe Biden? And he has said repeatedly that he doesn't want that. And he's made that threat, before that people like Angus King have made too, which is if Republicans insist on trying to block everything, maybe the filibuster has to go. And so Republicans, of course, are going to keep trying to block everything because that's the only game they have. It's the only thing they know how to do. But I think there's a real chance here that if we can keep doing this and we can keep putting pressure on Manchin, and I don't know if me and you and listeners can put pressure on Manchin, but Joe Biden can. Joe Biden can, in a way that President Warren or President Bernie never would do. I mean, I think Manchin would have enjoyed opposing those two. Like, he would have gotten off on it. With Biden, Biden's one of him, old white guy, right? So he can't do that. So Biden, can slip him some goodies or give him, trade off some things to do some horse trading to make sure that that Manchin stays aboard, at least on the big spending bills. Now, DC statehood might be a little tougher, but I'm hopeful. I mean, can you imagine if with this 50-50 Senate, that all this stuff is happening, if we can get a couple more seats and a little breathing room, and then Manchin can do whatever he wants at that point.
Yeah, he can roll the skin on the ceiling if he wants to. It won't matter.
Yeah,
he'll be
freedom. That's what that buys him, freedom.
Yeah, so he ought to be for it. So, folks, as you know, Marcos's original mistress was Georgia. Then he got a second mistress in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And I guess now he's practicing polygamy, because if you listen to the brief this week, he's talking about Texas. So these are his mistresses and his passion. We invite you, his passions. So we invite you to check out the brief this week and hear all about the case he makes for Texas. And he's right. But we got to do it. We can do it. We can't feel it. We can do it. And by doing it, that means getting out to vote, replicating what happened in Georgia this past January everywhere. Just showing up, and showing out, overwhelming the numbers so that no matter what the suppression effort is, it's hard to still beat us with the suppression.
Joe Biden only lost Texas by 5.5 points.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the margin, funny enough, that Hillary Clinton lost Georgia by in 2016 and overcame that margin. And it's really funny, Mark. Do you remember back 10 years ago when we were talking about Texas and Georgia, and I was telling you about how there were 700,000 unregistered African Americans in Metro Atlanta alone? Like, that was a number, and I think it came out of actually Stacey Abrams is where I first heard that. Guess how many unregistered African Americans there are in Texas?
How many?
700,000. It's the story. It's the same story.
Wow.
And so, and Texas has, I think by raw numbers, has the second largest population of African Americans in the entire country. I think New York is first. I think New York has the most of anybody, and then I think Texas is number 2.
Okay.
And as a percentage, it's also number 2. I think as a percentage, Mississippi obviously it's got the most. Right. But it's huge, right? As a percentage, people think Texas, they think Latinos, right? There's a huge Black community in Texas that is not as hasn't performed as the way it was back in Georgia, right? Where there was no hope, and what does it matter, and nobody's spending money to identify them and talk to them and help them out. The Koch brothers are in Texas trying to help out Latinos, right? Like, we don't, liberals for donors, for some reason, they'd rather spend money trying to win farmers in Iowa than are actually our core base, which is Black and Latino voters and young people. So there's this huge untapped, mass of people in Texas. If we were to register them to vote, so 700,000 unregistered African Americans. Biden lost the state by 600,000. And that's not including unregistered Latinos, unregistered young white liberals in cities, unregistered, right? So the numbers are there. The numbers are there.
Is there a Texas Senate seat open in 2020?
No, unfortunately not. No, Ted Cruz is lucky that he's not up for re-election after his stunt he pulled. He's up in 2024. So next year, though, we have the governor's race. We have the statewides. Right. So that'll be a big battle because, again, big question, are the Trump people going to turn out? And they didn't 4 years ago, and that's when Cruz almost lost to Beto O'Rourke. So here we have these statewide elections. We can win control of the state legislature. We can win the governorship, lieutenant governorship. Texas is weird in that the lieutenant governor has more power than the governor. It's one of those weird constitutional
That is,
political statistics, right? That people don't realize. But so it'll be a big battle. But then 2024, then you have Ted Cruz up for re-election and the presidential vote as well. So it's a state that's going to be happening politically for the next 4 years. And there's great organizing people on the brief this week. We talked to the Texas Organizing Project. These, it's this on the ground organization organizing Black and Latino voters in most of the major cities. So around Texas, Dallas, and San Antonio, and I think maybe Austin as well. And they're talking to literally millions of voters, and they could talk to so many more if they had the resources to do so. I don't understand why billionaires can come in and just drops $100 million on them to do this work. Like, you want to flip, you want to obsolete Republicans, like, take over Texas.
That's right.
Spend that money on Florida. Get those newly enfranchised former felons in Florida just got the vote. Why wasn't there like $100 million just to get those people registered and turned out? Like, nothing. So that's a big challenge we face as a movement still. It's an underinvestment in our core non-white communities. And that's because most of the donors, most of the wealth is white people. Yeah. And that's a culture that needs to change.
Yeah. Folks, do check out the new podcast, The Brief. Check out Daily Kos. Check out Civics with a Q. All of the above. Always a pleasure to talk to you, buddy. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Talk to you next week. Thanks so much.
Talk next week. That's Thursday Kos, folks.